I'm not ashamed.
What was the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Matthew on walking through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Matthew chapter 16. We're going to be reading from verses 5 to 12. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Matthew chapter 16, beginning at verse 5. Now when his disciples had come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said to them, Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, It is because we have taken no bread. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, O you of little faith, why do you reason among yourselves because you have brought no bread? Do you not yet understand or remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many large baskets you took up? How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you concerning bread, but to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and Sadducees. In verses 1 to 4, Jesus was in the region of Magdala on the western side of the Sea of Galilee. While there, the Pharisees and Sadducees had come to him in search of a sign. Jesus had performed miracles for likely the better part of 18 months to 2 years, and yet the Pharisees and Sadducees hadn't believed in him. Why would they believe a sign even if Jesus did one for them? Jesus tells them that only a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, but none would be given it except that of the prophet Jonah, which of course concerns his resurrection. Having left the Pharisees and Sadducees behind, Jesus and the disciples once again get into a boat and cross over to the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee. From our previous readings about the conditions on this side of the sea, we know that there is plenty of desert places where there is not many opportunities to buy food. And yet here you have the disciples crossing the sea but forgetting to bring bread. Mark 8 says that they brought with them only 1 loaf, which is not a contradiction, for 1 loaf was certainly not enough to non-miraculously feed the disciples. That Matthew states that they have no bread is stating the truth, not that they had absolutely no bread, but that they basically had no bread because what they had was so little. We do so all the time, for often we state that we have no food, when in fact we have not enough food to accomplish our purpose. Jesus knew that the disciples brought no bread, and so it is quite likely that he used this analogy here to test the faith of the disciples. He said that they were to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Up to this point in his ministry, he had pointed out the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and the danger of following after the religious leaders of that day, for they weren't teaching the truth. However, he had never used this analogy about leaven before to describe their teachings as far as we can tell. Thus, that he chose to use it here when the disciples were thinking about bread is why it is likely that he did so to test their faith. And naturally, with the disciples overly concerned about bread, they didn't understand Jesus' meaning, thinking he was chastising them for bringing no bread and warning them about the bread of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Of course, he was doing no such thing, but seeing their lack of faith, asked them why they thought that forgetting to bring any bread would have posed a problem to Jesus. Did they not remember when he fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves, how many baskets they took up? Did he not remember when he fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves, how many baskets they took up? Would it therefore be a problem to Jesus and to God to provide for them if such became necessary? Jesus' words here again show us that the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000 were 2 separate miracles, not repetitions or revisions of the same story. Instead, he tells them that he wasn't speaking about bread, but was saying that they need to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Having been told that Jesus wasn't speaking about bread, the disciples now recognize that he was speaking figuratively, with the leaven representing the doctrines of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Leaven, of course, is what is used to raise bread. Only a little leaven is needed in a large lump of dough to produce this effect during baking, and so Jesus is warning his disciples not to accept even the smallest form of false doctrine from the Pharisees and Sadducees, for it will grow and affect their beliefs in other areas. For us today, sometimes we think if we accept a little religious error, that it either won't affect us personally or it won't affect our standing before God. Jesus' lesson to the disciples is a lesson for us today. There are many false doctrines and false churches out in the world today. We need to avoid these teachings and teachers, for if we believe them, those false teachings will permeate through our lives and have the ability to doom our soul into hell. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Matthew 16, verses 13 to 20, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.